I just came across this article recently regarding a DNA test or recent genetic or DNA findings of the ancient Israelites. I first heard about it in an interview in a interview with Razib Khan. So I have the article here. It's called "And First Archaeologists Extract DNA of Ancient Israelites." And I was kind of surprised that this is a first. Um, because I was under the impression that archaeogeneticists and geneticists in general had at least one or two Israelite samples from the Iron Age. I know for sure they have Canaanite, Bronze Age Canaanite samples, specifically from Sidon, which is a Phoenician or was a Phoenician city-state, that dates back to the Bronze Age when it was more generally a Canaanite city-state, but regardless. Um, I know, yeah, I know geneticists have Canaanite samples, and there's that one big study from 2019 where they sampled the Philistines or Philistine uh, remains, um, and they were able to extract genomes from Philistine skeletons. And uh, pretty obviously, results showed that the first wave of Philistine or Philist, I don't think it matters how you pronounce it. I'll just say Philistine from now on. The first wave of Philistine uh, settlers in the Levant, specifically uh, in the area that had the cities of Gath and Ashdod, the the first wave of these Philistine settlers were of Aegean or Southern Greek origin, generally speaking. But as the centuries wore on and later on, as you got later into the Iron Age, they assimilated into the local Canaanite population, and the later Philistine samples clustered more with Canaanite uh, samples. So, in a nutshell, first Philistine settlers were of Aegean origin, and then the later Philistines were more closely related to Canaanites as they assimilated into Canaanite, Iron Age Canaanite society. Um, but yeah, that's the most notable one, or the most notable uh, DNA study that I remember, because for there was uh I think it was pretty obvious to archaeologists that prior to this DNA study that the Philistines came from the Aegean and like the Mycenaean region because of their material culture in the various city states of the Philistines and other Philistine sites. It clearly there's clearly Mycenaean, uh what's called Mycenaean, uh I guess strata 3 pottery or Mycenaean 3 pottery. And there was also uh there these Philistine sites also had uh statues of like various Mycenaean goddesses and whatnot. Specifically, there's one called the Mother Goddess, I believe. But anyways, their material culture is almost identical to the Mycenaean material culture of the late Bronze Age. So when that DNA study of the Philistines came out in 2019, basically archaeologists from Israel and any other archaeologists who have worked in that region basically said, I mean, yeah, we're not surprised. This is what archaeologists already knew, that they came from that region of the Mediterranean and the Aegean, Mycenaean region of southern Greece. But anyways, yeah, I tend to ramble, but uh, what I'm basically what I'm getting at is there had geneticists do have Canaanite samples. They have Philistine samples. But I was under the impression that there was one or two Israelite samples from the First Temple period. But let's dive into this article. For the first time, ancient DNA has been recovered from the bodies of ancient Israelites living in the First Temple period, Haaretz has learned. This achievement, a holy grail in the study of lost civilizations, was enabled following the discovery near Jerusalem of a rare family tomb dating to the Iron Age. That's also pretty interesting uh, that they bring up the family tomb because although um, there have been other family tombs that have been found in Jerusalem and uh, within what was Judea. Uh, Usually they find these archaeologists find these tombs in Jerusalem, but they date to the Second Temple period, and especially these family tombs are very common during the uh, Second Temple Roman era of Israel Palestine. The most notable one that I could think of off the top of my head is the Talpiot tomb. Uh, but yeah, these Second Temple family tombs had ossuaries or bone boxes in them. And I'm not sure how many off the top of my head archaeologists have found from the Second Temple period, but they're pretty common. But I guess uh I guess they're calling it this particular tomb a holy grail in the study of archaeology and lost civilizations because uh and they're saying it's a rare family tomb dating to the Iron Age. So it's from the period of about 1,000 to 500 BCE. Uh, so it's a lot less common than the Second Temple period. But so far, the collaboration of archaeologists and geneticists has been able to extract genetic material from two individuals, producing partial information, which is a tiny sample indeed. So I guess they weren't able to get the entire or extract the entire genome of these two individuals, but um, regardless, they should be able to. Seems like they're able to uh, get some samples, some Y haplogroup or Y DNA or mitochondrial DNA from these two individuals. But it promises to pave the way for further research on long-standing questions about the origins of the ancient Israelites. There are links to earlier populations living in the Levant as well as to modern day Jewish people. So as I mentioned, uh I mean, I haven't finished this article yet. Obviously, I skimmed through it before I started this video, but I'm gonna guess that, like I said, I'm gonna guess that were able to get uh the mitochondrial DNA and the Y DNA from one or the other or both from these two samples. And as the sentence says, um, even with just the Y DNA and mitochondrial DNA, geneticists and archaeogeneticists can determine the origin of um, these two Israelite individuals, and they're able to determine which other groups and which other populations they share the most recent common ancestry with, so to speak, or the most recent or had the closest relations or relationships with, which is another way of saying common ancestry. But uh and also with regards to this statement, there are links to earlier populations living in the Levant as well as to modern day Jewish people. Uh so there have been, as I've mentioned in my video responding to the Kyrie Irving controversy way back in 2022, there have been DNA studies on modern day Jewish populations, and the evidence is conclusive that all Jewish groups, Ashkenazi, Sephardic, and Mizrahi, Syrian, and Lebanese Jews all trace their ancestry back to what is today Israel, uh, Israel, Palestine. Um, so that's pretty conclusive, or that is pretty, yeah, that's pretty conclusive with regards to who the ancestors of modern day Jews are, or who their ancestors were, which were the Israelites. But uh, also, I have brought this up in my video response to the historicity of Moses debate that was on Modern Day Debate, also way back in 2022. But uh, based on the archaeological evidence, the it's pretty obvious that the Israelites were Canaanites, and they were uh, related culturally and genetically to the other Levantine populations that also descended from the Canaanites, like the Phoenicians. In fact, I'm gonna guess once they get the full genomes of these two individuals or any other Iron Age Israelite individuals, that they'll once you place them on a principal component analysis chart, uh, you'll they'll plot extremely close, if not, they'll be pretty much identical to Bronze Age Canaanite and Iron Age Phoenician samples as well. Um, but uh, but yeah, that's like the same. It's kind of the same situation as the with archaeologists and their reaction to the Philistine DNA tests, because they were basic as I said, they were basically like, yeah, the archaeology was pretty conclusive. We already knew where these people came from. Same thing with the Israelites. It's I guarantee that the findings will show that they are obviously a Levantine population, and their closest genetic relatives are going to be other Canaanite Levantine populations. And that's not going to be a surprise to archaeologists who have studied um, the early Iron Age Israelite sites, because the archaeological record at those sites shows that the Israelites were the cultural and overall descendants of the Canaanites. Preliminary results from the excavation and the DNA study were expected to be presented at a conference about the new archaeological discoveries in Jerusalem and its environs on Wednesday, and Haaretz has obtained an advanced copy of the researchers' paper. The conference has since been delayed due to the ongoing conflict between Israel and Gaza. So Hamas, as always, has to ruin everything. This story begins in 2018, when the Theft Prevention Unit of the Israel Antiquities Authority discovered a tomb in the village of Abu Ghosh, which is right next to the biblical settlement of Kiryat Yearim, some 15 kilometers west of Jerusalem. The tomb has been badly damaged, first by construction and then by looting. I mean, that's always the issue or the danger with these archaeological sites. They can be damaged by, whether it be modern warfare, as um, as was alluded to in this article, the Israel-Gaza conflict, or by construction, or by housing development, and also looting. People throughout the centuries or millennia can stumble across these sites and steal various goods from these tombs or sites. So that's always the danger that archaeologists have to deal with uh, when trying to preserve these sites or excavate them. So, and then the archaeologists conducted a hurried salvage excavation. Although only a fraction of the tomb had survived, the researchers uncovered some 150 pottery vessels, including bowls, jars, and lamps, as well as jumbled skeletal remains of at least 10 individuals, the archaeologists report. And, even if these bodies weren't found and it was just pottery, jars, and lamps that were found in this tomb, that's still, I would still consider that a successful archaeological excavation, because anytime you can find the material remains of a past culture or civilization, and you're able to get a substantial amount of artifacts such as bowls or jars or lamps, as this article states, that can still tell you a lot about this particular family, or the culture that left these artifacts behind. So, you know, even if you don't find a body in a archaeological site, it can still be a successful dig. But luckily, they found two skeletal remains of individuals from the Iron Age, and that gives archaeologists even more data to work with. Those interred in the tomb included 6 adults, 3 men, and 3 women, 4 children, including 2 babies, 1 infant, an adolescent. This is consistent with the high mortality rate of children in ancient times, the researchers note. Based on the pottery typology used in the funerary offerings, it seems that the tomb was used for a prolonged period, around 750 to 650 BCE, placing it in the late Iron Age or late First Temple period, according to biblical chronology. So, so this part of the article, even though it alludes to it, it doesn't really go into detail or explain how archaeologists can date these sites using pottery. Yeah, I mean, it states that that the archaeologists were able to use the pottery to date it, but it doesn't explain what the methodology is. So basically, this method, called culture history, was invented by Flinders Petrie, who was an Egyptian or an archaeologist of ancient Egypt and Egyptologist as well. So basically, you use different pottery types, so to speak, to and you see how they change over time, and you uh trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Basically, it's pretty simple once you understand it, but different pottery types date to different periods within, say, let's say the Iron Age. But like, for example, the like if an archaeologist finds a site within Israel and he wants to know where, if it dates to the, like, let's say 1000 BC uh or 750 BC or something like that, he would take a look at the pottery and see which type it is identical to from other known sites. And if those sites were already dated to the, like, 1000 BCE, then the archaeologist will know that this site is from roughly 1000 BCE. Um, so basically, this is, as I said, this uses culture history, and it's also relative dating. So if archaeologists already know that that the pottery type that is used at a certain site dates to a specific century or a rough date, like for example here 750 to 650 BCE, based on other sites that have already been dated, then relative dating can be used to date this particular site or a particular site based on the pottery. The tomb is an important find in its own right, given that burials from this period are rare and tend to be from slightly later times, generally closer to the fall of Jerusalem and the first temple to the Babylonians in 586 BCE, says Israel Finkelstein, who by the way is a well-renowned and uh, well-known archaeologist of the biblical world, an archaeologist at Tel Aviv University and University of Haifa. Finkelstein was called in to lead the research on the tomb as he was already heading a dig at Kiryat Yearim, a settlement which is mentioned in the Bible as having housed the Ark of the Covenant before it was brought to Jerusalem. I suppose that we are dealing with a family tomb, likely from the elite of Kiryat Yearim, whose members were buried there over a long period of time. We don't know how big it was originally because most of it was destroyed in recent years. But yeah, this goes back to what finding grave goods or finding different artifacts in a tomb can tell you about a family or the culture that left it behind, even if there's no bodies in the tomb. Because the way Israel Finkelstein and other archaeologists were able to determine that this was an elite family of Kiryat Yearim, it was by looking at what artifacts were found in the tomb and seeing which tombs that these types of artifacts or goods are normally found in, and if they're restricted to a only a few tombs that clearly seem to be of elite status, and they're not found in like more simple tombs that look to be of a lower status, then they can know that this is an elite family tomb. Together with Professor David Reich, a geneticist at Harvard, and mathematician Dr. Ari Schaus, Finkelstein embarked on a quest to extract DNA. The technique of extracting genetic material from the ancient bones, teeth, and other organic remains began to emerge over 20 years ago, and has since reached such sophistication that researchers are even divining some information on creatures that lived over 1 million years ago. It is rare for bones to be preserved well enough to provide any genetic material at all, yet the ability to extract and sequence genetic material from ancient remains has given researchers major insights into the origins, migrations, and history of human populations, as well as prehistoric hominins, animals, and plants. But big questions remain when it comes to genetic history of the Jewish people. Looking far into the past, inquisitive minds have long asked, who were the ancient Hebrews, the inhabitants of the biblical kingdoms of Judah and Israel in the Iron Age? From which population did they descend, and how were they connected to their neighbors, Philistines, Edomites, and Moabites, and so on? Okay, so this is just giving a summary of sort of the scientific history of the study of the Israelites and biblical archaeology, and uh, the history the of the study of the ancient Israelites. Looking at the present, we wonder what is the genetic link between first temple period Israelites and today's Jews, and which other populations intermingled. So let me just skip to the results. Uh, Over the years, scientists have found some indirect evidence pertaining to the genetic origins of the Israelites. More about this later by looking at the DNA of modern Jews as well as Bronze Age Canaanites. So, yeah, as I mentioned before, geneticists do have samples of Bronze Age Canaanites. One sample's from like Sidon. Um, but yeah, what they're talking about here is they've been able to take the genomes of modern Jews and plot them with various other modern and ancient genomes, and including the Canaanites. And basically, the results showed that there is a strong connection between the modern day Jews and Bronze Age Canaanites, um, especially Jews from the Middle East. There are several reasons for this. Uh, well-preserved DNA is harder to find in hot Middle Eastern climes, and that's why that ancient DNA is always hard to extract depending on uh what region of the world these samples are coming from. And so it sound and in this tomb, it sounds like there was, I think it said six individuals. There was a number of individuals, but the geneticists were only able to extract two genomes the this this group of samples because of how hard it is to get ancient DNA and sequence it. Even to get even to get mitochondrial or Y-DNA is pretty hard too. Uh, that has been partly because of the rarity of ancient Hebrew graves and largely because in Judaism, excavating or disturbing graves is a big taboo. So that's another obstacle uh, that archaeologists have to deal with. Um, and also in Israel, hold on, God, damn internet. All right. Um, okay. If my internet starts working, let's just finish this up. Let's see here. All right, here we go. It's true that no ancient Hebrew inscriptions were found in the burial confirming that the deceased were Israelites. However, the pottery assemblage is typical of what was found in late first late First Temple period burials in Jerusalem. Finkelstein explains, together with Kiryat Yearim's proximity to what was the capital of the Kingdom of Judah, this suggests that the locals can indeed be identified as ancient Hebrews. So, yeah, just because there's no Hebrew inscriptions, that doesn't mean you can't. There's in other lines of archaeological evidence that can indicate or determine the cultural origin of these people or these individuals from the tomb. As stated here, if the material, culture, or artifacts in the tomb overlaps with or is identical to other Israelite sites, then it's safe to assume that these individuals were Israelites. And also, this site is close to Jerusalem. So, yeah, it's safe to say they were Israelites. Of course, cultural identity and genetic background are not the same. Genetic background can be revealed by an ancient DNA study. Identities about culture, geography, and can change through the ages. This is also true in the present. Just look at the population of modern Israel. All right. Uh, Real quick though, I know I go on a lot of tangents or and I tend to ramble, but uh, and this might be pretty OCD of me, but I feel like I don't know if I explained to you guys well enough, like uh how these archaeologists use pottery to date the site, date various sites, and specifically this site at Kiryat Yearim. So, I just want to make sure that it's clear that different, like, if you there's known sites with specific types of pottery that have already been dated to a specific time period, like let's say 750 BCE, and you find another site such as Kiryat Yearim, and the pottery and material culture strongly overlaps and is identical to the pottery type that's found in these 750 other 750 BCE sites, then uh then it's you can be pretty confident that this site dates to that time period. And also the style of the tomb and architecture of that site, if it overlaps with the other sites as well, then that adds more evidence. But something else to keep in mind is the the other sites that date to uh the example that I use 750 BCE, since that's when this site is dated to. The other sites, their archaeologists have been able to date those sites through exact dating with, let's say, radiocarbon, C14 radiocarbon dating, or they can use luminescence dating, where they can see when exactly the pottery was put in the kiln, and and basically when the fire was turned on in the kiln and the pottery was fired, and uh, basically that that that's another method of dating these sites. And also geological methods of dating, such as the law, using principles such as the law of superposition. Uh, basic simply that law, or that principle from geology, states that the older a site is, the lower the strata is going to be, or the lower the layer is going to be, and the newer sites are going to be higher up. So the other sites that have the same exact pottery as, let's say, as a Kiryat Yearim, if they are, like, if you can show through stratigraphy, or uh, uh, if you can show their position relative to other strata, um, that, like, I'll put it to you this way: like, if the strata dating to, or the strata dating to 750 BCE are lower than, let's say, a site that dates to the Hellenistic period, then it's obvious that these sites are older. And you can also use the principle of superposition, or you can use stratigraphy to date a site such as Kiryat Yearim. But anyway, I like to ramble, so just wanted to clear that up. Um, okay, let's see here. There's also a question as to whether Kiryat Yearim was controlled by Judah or its larger and often rivaled northern neighbor, the Kingdom of Israel. Finkelstein's recent excavations at the site have revealed a large artificial platform at the top of the settlement, which is typical of the Northern Kingdom's urban planning. It suggests that Kiryat Yearim was initially under the control of Israel, at least until that kingdom was conquered by the Assyrians. So, yeah, this is a perfect example of how architecture can also indicate the influence or the cultural origin of a site. So it seems like the Kingdom of Israel had a stronger sphere of influence over this site as opposed to the kingdom of Judah until Samaria was destroyed and the kingdom of Israel was destroyed by the Assyrians. Um, but let's see here. Yeah, I've talked about the kingdom of Israel obviously in my two of my previous videos on their connections with the Phoenicians, since they were a much wealthier kingdom than Judah at the prior to like 700 BCE. Uh, it makes sense that they would have an influence over more southern sites like Kiryat Yearim. In any case, the genetic data from Kiryat Yearim offers the first glimpse of how directly sampling remains from the First Temple period can shed light on the history of the ancient Hebrews, Israelite or Judahite. Two sampled individuals were one male, one female. The conference paper only discusses data from the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA sections of the genome that are inherited from only from the father and mother respectively. So as I guess, they were able to get Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA. So even though that's not a full genome, that still gives us an a idea of where these Israelites came from and what's their origin and which other groups they have recent common ancestry with, so to speak. Um, but and also this there have been I you know Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA studies are useful for determining or the origins of various groups and populations throughout the world. In fact, that's what was used in several of the studies, not all the studies, because there are genome-wide studies of modern Jews, but there have been mitochondrial DNA studies of modern Jews, and the results from these studies always show that they have common ancestry with Christian Palestinians and Samaritans and Muslim Palestinians and other peoples of the Levant. So that shows that the Jews, whether in Europe or the Middle East, have traced their ancestry back to the Levant. This is only partial data with a more detailed paper coming in the future. So maybe eventually they'll be able to uh, sample or get the full genome of these two individuals. Sampling DNA from ancient Israelites is exciting, as it should make it possible to test how they relate genetically to previous groups, to contemporary non-Israelite groups, and to people living today. And it's just more data that can be used when doing like a genetic history of the Middle East and comparing ancient populations to modern populations. But and also the uh the whatever the results, or I'm pretty confident the results are going to be show that they're most related to modern Levantine peoples and ancient Canaanites, but that's just going to confirm what archaeologists already knew, and it's going to show that archaeological methods for uh, classifying cultures and determining the ethnic origins of different various past cultures is rigorous, and it's always good for genetics and archaeology uh, to be used to study ancient sites, and it just helps us learn more about these ancient cultures. The highlight of the very partial results is that the Y chromosome is that the Y chromosome in the man belongs to the J2 haplogroup, a group of closely related DNA sequences that is believed to have originated in the Caucasus or Eastern Anatolia. And so I'm not surprised. This haplogroup is found throughout the Middle East and various populations that have ancestry that goes back to the Neolithic Anatolia. So the first farmers. Uh, but the so wait, hold on here. So it's originated in Caucasus, vast area that includes modern day East Turkey, northwest Iran, Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan. So, but anyway, um, yeah, it's not surprising. And I talked about this in once again in my response to the Kyrie Irving controversy. Um, the so if you look at like Canaanite genomes the uh and like the ancestry of the Neolithic Levant and then the Bronze Age Levant, it's basically a mix of Natufian and Neolithic Anatolia, and there's a little bit of Caucasus hunter-gatherer. And in fact, I brought up a study that shows that about 6,000 years ago, the genes for blue eyes entered into Israel, Palestine, and the Levant more broadly. And that most likely came from the Caucasus region. And it could have come, and that could have coincided with J2, but I'm not too sure on that. I would have to look at that study again. But regardless, I'm not surprised. We already, geneticists and archaeogeneticists already knew that the genetic makeup of the Neolithic and Bronze Age Levant was a mix of Natufian, who were the Paleolithic peoples living in what is now Israel, and also the Neolithic Levant. There was an influx of uh, genes from that region as well, and then also, if I remember correctly, Iranian Chalcolithic. There's also some of that in the Bronze Age of Levant and also the Caucasus, hunter-gatherers. This is important because, as mentioned, researchers have already mapped the DNA of ancient Canaanites, showing that they have strong ancestral connection to modern day Jewish and Arab populations. And that's not surprising because, especially with Christian populations in the Levant, they have little to no Arab DNA. So most of their ancestry goes back to the Bronze Age Levant and the Bronze Age Canaanites. Uh, but yeah, I guess I'll wrap it up here. Once again, uh, if you know, if you're familiar with or have been familiar with what the archaeological record shows with regards to the origins of the Israelites, this should not be surprising. I mean, that they share the same Y chromosome as other peoples from the Middle East, specifically other Canaanites and other Levantine peoples. Because if you know anything about the Israelite material culture from the early Iron Age, it's identical to Bronze Age Canaanite material culture. But yeah, this is still a very interesting study, and I'm excited to learn, or I'm excited for the rest of this study to come out. But yeah, I'll wrap it up here.